The chairman: you do not see anything to criticise about General Motors carrying all of the reductions in tax in profit rather than decreasing the prices. Mr. Graham: my own views on that may seem peculiar to you, Senator, but I think that General Motors does not care to reduce its prices substantially because of the effect on the competitive situation would be disastrous. General Motors has to make a very good profit in order that the other automobile companies can exist at all. If it made a small profit, some of the other automobile companies would go out of business completely. The chairman: why do you want to subsidise these other automobile companies at the expense of the poor farmer who is struggling along on a starvation diet now? Mr. Graham: Senator, I did not suggest that. The chairman: the prices for these Chevrolets are enormous. If they could cut them $800, it would help a lot. Mr. Graham: I would like to make my point of view clear again. I am not expressing my own opinion as to what should or should not be done. I'm only telling you what I think General Motors' policy and that General Motors itself cannot dare in the present state of the economy and political sentiment to reduce its prices to a point where other companies were forced out of business and General Motors had almost a monopoly of the business. The chairman: well, in another way, you are saying there is no competition in the automobile business, are you not? Mr. Graham: no, sir, that is not true either, because in the first place competition between General Motors and Ford is very keen, and the competition between General Motors and Chrysler used to be very keen and now is again becoming keen. The chairman: to show you how innocent I am, I do not understand it at all. I always thought the price happened to be the principal element in competition, that you could not have competition if you did not care what the price was, and that all the rest was shadowboxing and just make-believe. If you were really competitive and you desired to have the market, I had thought one of the first things to do was sell cheaper. That used to be the orthodox doctrine. This idea that the competition is just in advertising to keep the price up makes no sense to the old-fashioned man. It sounds exactly like the cartel system in Germany. We split up the market and all take our part, and then when we advertise and make people believe we are competing, and there is no real competition. If General Motors really is competing and desirous of obtaining the market, she would get in, would she not, by cutting the prices? Mr. Graham: well, Senator, my view of this thing may be wrong, but it differs quite a bit from yours. I think the competition that existed between General Motors and Chrysler, for example, was very intense, and its effect on Chrysler was almost disastrous. Chrysler lost virtually all of its earnings power last year, and although its business remained high in terms of dollars, it lost on sales cars to a point where earnings almost disappeared, and tremendous effort was necessary by Chrysler to improve its cars and to improve its selling practice. Now, that as far as I can see is more or less classical example of the actual working of competition. The chairman: I am afraid I gave a false impression. I am not now at least trying to express an opinion for or against it. I am trying to develop whether or not there is competition in the automobile field. I am unable to see that there is, in view of your statement that all General Motors needs to do to put them all out of business is lower the prices to where it could still get along and it would not go broke, but it could break its competitors. In orthodox competitive business, that is what happens, is it not? In the old days, that is what happened, is it not? I do not say I disagree with you that that would be a bad thing socially and politically it is dangerous. That is a different thing from saying that it is really competitive. Do you really feel that it is competition, or do you feel that it would be inadvisable to permit competitive forces to have their full sway? Mr. Graham: could I try and summarise my view by saying that I believe there is a great deal of competition in the automobile business today, but it is not competition carried to its final conclusion. I mean the destruction of the weaker companies. The chairman: it is sort of superficial competition. Mr. Graham: it is a limited objective competition. The chairman: some of the bureaucrats or somebody developed a term called administered prices. Is that not what it is? They can get together and decide if you go below a certain amount, you can destroy Chrysler, and that is not wise to destroy Chrysler. Mr. Graham: as long as you are speaking of economic principle, you must remember there is such a thing as optimum or maximisation of profits, and it is quite possible that General Motors, by cutting their prices, could do more business, but at the same time earn less money. There is no reason in the world why General Motors, as an ordinary business, should not charge such prices as will give it maximum profits. The chairman: If it ran them all out with a monopoly, they could charge what they like. Mr. Graham: No, sir, the United States would interfere. The Chairman: That is what I am talking about. You're getting into a different field and leaving the old-fashioned competition when you talk about interference by the government and what the social and political effects may be. I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. I've heard it said before, and I was interested that you confirmed that General Motors could make a reasonable profit. I think that is the language, and still destroy all of its competition because of the way it is set up and its efficiency, if you like that term, or at least its distribution and volume. I would gather you agree with that. Mr. Graham: I do not know the situation intimately, but I feel that probably is so. The Chairman: I think it is important simply because as your economy changes, these different aspects arise which do not involve things beyond the immediate profits of a company. I think it would be a great catastrophe if all the other companies were put out of business. I would agree with you on that, but at the same time I do not like to kid myself that they are out there fighting for business, because they are not. General Motors could get it if it thought it was wise to do it and still not really injure itself. Of course, its own personal advantage or disadvantage, regardless of the nation, would be another matter.